The sound of the river rushing over smooth stones was almost enough to drown out the sobbing, but Harlan Emerson heard it anyway as he rode along the bank toward his favorite fishing spot, just outside Chico, California, on that warm afternoon in June of 1878. He had been hoping for a quiet evening alone after a long cattle drive from Sacramento, but the sight of a woman sitting on the riverbank with her face buried in her hands made him pull his horse to a stop. His mother had raised him to be a gentleman, even if the frontier had roughened his edges over the years. Harlan dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the pebbled shore, and he cleared his throat softly so as not to startle her too badly. The woman looked up with red-rimmed eyes, her face streaked with tears. She appeared to be somewhere in her early 20s, with dark auburn hair that had partially escaped its pins and hung in waves around her shoulders. Her blue calico dress was dusty and wrinkled, as though she had been traveling for some time. When she saw him, she quickly tried to wipe her tears away, embarrassment flooding her features. "I apologize, sir. I did not mean to intrude on your spot," she said, her voice thick with emotion and a slight Eastern accent. Harlan shook his head and held up his hand. "No need to apologize, miss. This river belongs to everyone who needs it." He studied her for a moment, noting the way her hands trembled and the lost look in her green eyes. Without asking permission or saying another word, he simply walked over and sat down on the smooth rock beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that she would know she was not alone. She looked at him with surprise, then confusion, then finally something that might have been relief. They sat there in silence for several minutes, listening to the water flow and the birds calling from the cottonwood trees overhead. Harlan picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water's surface, watching it bounce 3 times before sinking. He did it again with another stone, not rushing her, not asking questions, just being present. After a while, the woman's breathing steadied. She wiped her eyes again and straightened her shoulders a little. "I must look a fright," she said quietly. "You look like someone who has been carrying a heavy burden," Harlan replied, his voice gentle. "I have found that tears sometimes lighten the load a bit." She glanced at him sideways, and he caught a glimpse of curiosity breaking through the sadness. "Are you always this philosophical, or is this a special occasion?" Harlan allowed himself a small smile. "My mother used to say that cowboys spent so much time alone with their thoughts that they either became poets or went mad. I like to think I ended up somewhere in between." That earned him a tiny, almost imperceptible upturn at the corner of her mouth. It was not quite a smile, but it was a start. They sat together for another long while, and Harlan found himself in no hurry to move. He had nowhere pressing to be, and something about this woman's sorrow touched something deep in his chest that he had thought long buried. "My name is Olivia Nelson," she finally said, extending a hand toward him with a formality that seemed out of place on the wild riverbank, but somehow suited her perfectly. "Harlan Emerson," he replied, taking her hand gently. Her fingers were small and cold in his rougher, calloused palm. "Are you new to Chico, Miss Nelson?" She nodded, withdrawing her hand and folding both hands in her lap. "I arrived on the morning stage. I came from Boston to meet my fiancé. He sent for me 6 months ago, saying he had established a good business here and we could finally be married." Her voice cracked on the last word and Harlan felt his jaw tighten. "Let me guess," he said quietly. "Things did not go as planned." Olivia laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "That would be putting it mildly. When I arrived at the address he had given me, I found that it was a saloon. The proprietor told me that Mr. Gerald Whitmore had indeed worked there for a time, but he had fled town 3 weeks ago with money he had stolen from various people, including debts he had run up at several businesses. Apparently, He had a wife in San Francisco that he had conveniently forgotten to mention to me. Harlan felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of a man treating any woman that way, let alone this one who had traveled across an entire continent to build a life with him. "I am truly sorry, Miss Nelson. That is a terrible thing to do to anyone. The worst part," Olivia continued, her voice trembling again, "is that I used every penny I had saved to buy my ticket west. I have no money for a return journey, no family to wire for help. My parents died 2 years ago and I have no siblings. Gerald was supposed to be my fresh start, my new beginning." She pressed her hands to her face. "I am completely alone and stranded in a place I do not know, and I do not have the first idea what to do." The tears came again, and Harlan felt utterly helpless. He was a man of action, more comfortable with physical challenges than emotional ones, but something about Olivia's situation struck him deeply. He thought about his own sister, who had died of fever 5 years ago, and wondered if someone had sat with her in her final difficult moments. He hoped so. "You are not alone right now," Harlan said firmly, "and we are going to figure this out together." Olivia looked up at him through her tears. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Harlan said simply, "and because I believe that is what separates us from the animals and the men like your former fiancé." He picked up another stone and handed it to her. "Here. Try skipping it across the water. It is harder than it looks, but when you get it right, there is something satisfying about it." Olivia took the stone, looking at it as though she had never seen such a thing before. She threw it with an awkward motion, and it plunked straight into the water without a single skip. Despite herself, she let out a small huff that might have been the beginning of a laugh. "That was terrible," she admitted. "It was," Harlan agreed, completely serious. "But we can work on your technique." He picked up another stone and demonstrated the proper wrist motion, then handed one to her. She tried again, and this time the stone bounced once before sinking. Her eyes widened slightly with surprise and something that might have been pride. "Better," Harlan said. "Try again." They spent the next few minutes skipping stones, and Harlan watched as the tension gradually eased from Olivia's shoulders. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the water in shimmering patterns. When Olivia finally managed to skip a stone twice, she let out a genuine laugh, and the sound was like music. "I did it," she exclaimed, turning to him with a real smile that transformed her entire face. Harlan felt his heart do something strange in his chest. She was beautiful when she smiled, truly beautiful, and he found himself wanting to see that expression on her face as often as possible. "You did," he confirmed, smiling back at her. "See, sometimes things get better." The smile faded slightly as reality reasserted itself, but it did not disappear entirely. "Thank you, Mr. Emerson. I know this probably seems foolish to you, but I genuinely feel a bit better than I did an hour ago. Call me Harlan, please, and it does not seem foolish at all." He stood up and offered her his hand to help her rise from the rock. "Now, let us go into town and find you a place to stay for the night. We can worry about the rest tomorrow." Olivia hesitated, biting her lip. "I told you I do not have any money. I have perhaps 50 cents to my name." "Then it is a good thing you made a friend today who does have money," Harlan said. When he saw her start to protest, he held up his hand. "Before you argue, know that I just got paid for a cattle drive and I have more than enough to spare. You can consider it a loan if that makes you feel better, and you can pay me back when you are able. But right now, you need a safe place to sleep and a hot meal, and I am not going to leave you out here by the river alone." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes again, but these were different. "You are very kind." "I am practical," Harlan corrected gently. "Come on. The boarding house in town is run by Mrs. Martha Campbell, and she is a good woman who will not ask too many questions if I vouch for you." Olivia took his hand and let him help her up. She gathered her small carpet bag from where it sat nearby, and Harlan noticed how worn and battered it looked. Everything she owned in the world was apparently contained in that one small bag. He led his horse by the reins with one hand and walked beside Olivia as they made their way along the river path back toward the main road into Chico. The town was bustling with evening activity when they arrived. Chico had grown considerably over the past few years, with new businesses opening regularly and people flooding in to take advantage of the fertile farmland and opportunities the area provided. The main street was lined with wooden buildings, some freshly painted and others weathered by the California sun. Harlan nodded to several people he knew as they passed, aware of the curious looks being directed at him and his companion. "People are staring," Olivia whispered nervously. "Let them stare," Harlan said. "Small towns thrive on gossip, but they also take care of their own. By tomorrow, half the town will know you are new here and the other half will be inventing stories about why. But some of those same people will also be thinking about whether they have work you could do or ways they could help." They reached the boarding house, a 2-story white building with green shutters and a wrap-around porch. Harlan tied his horse to the hitching post and carried Olivia's bag as he led her up the front steps. Before he could knock, the door swung open to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron. "Harlan Emerson, I heard you were back in town," Mrs. Campbell said warmly. Then her gaze shifted to Olivia, and her expression changed to one of concern. "And who is this poor dear? She looks exhausted." "Mrs. Campbell, this is Miss Olivia Nelson. She just arrived from Boston and has found herself in need of a room and some assistance. I was hoping you might have something available." Mrs. Campbell's eyes sharpened, and Harlan knew she was assessing the situation with the quick mind that had made her one of the most successful businesswomen in Chico. "Come in, both of you," she said, stepping aside. "Miss Nelson, you look like you could use some tea and something to eat." The interior of the boarding house was clean and comfortable, with lace curtains on the windows and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Mrs. Campbell led them to a small sitting room and gestured for Olivia to take a seat in one of the cushioned chairs. "I will make some tea," Mrs. Campbell said. "Harlan, come help me in the kitchen." Harlan followed her, knowing he was about to be interrogated. As soon as they were out of earshot, Mrs. Campbell turned to him with her hands on her hips. "What is really going on, Harlan? That girl has been crying, and she looks like her world just fell apart." Harlan explained the situation quickly and quietly, watching Mrs. Campbell's expression shift from concern to outrage. "Gerald Whitmore," she spat. "I knew there was something wrong about that man. He stayed here for 2 weeks when he first came to town, and he left without paying his full bill. Said he would settle up later, but of course he never did." She shook her head. "That poor girl. Traveled all this way for nothing." "I want to pay for a room for her," Harlan said, "at least for a week or two until she can figure out what to do next." Mrs. Campbell studied him for a long moment. "You have got a good heart, Harlan. Your mother would be proud." "Yes, I have a room available, a nice one that faces the garden, and I will not hear of you paying full price. Half rate, and that is final." "Mrs. Campbell, half rate," she repeated firmly. "And I will also put the word out that she is looking for work. Can she cook? So, keep books." "I do not know yet. I only just met her by the river." Mrs. Campbell's eyebrows rose. "By the river? What were you both doing out there?" "I was going fishing. She was crying. I sat with her until she felt better." Harlan said it matter-of-factly, but Mrs. Campbell's expression softened. "You sat with her until she felt better," she repeated quietly. Yes, your mother would definitely be proud. She patted his arm. All right, let us get this girl some tea and food and we will go from there. They returned to the sitting room with a tea tray and some leftover roast chicken and bread. Olivia accepted the food gratefully, and Harlan could see how hungry she was by the way she tried to eat slowly and politely, despite clearly wanting to devour everything in sight. Miss Nelson, Mrs. Campbell said gently, Harlan has told me something of your situation, and I want you to know that you are welcome to stay here. I have a lovely room available and we can discuss the particulars later. For now, you need to eat and rest. I cannot pay, Olivia said, her voice small. Not right now. But I am willing to work. I can clean, cook, sew, read and write and do figures. I will do whatever is needed. We will figure something out, Mrs. Campbell assured her. Chico is a good town with good people. We take care of each other here. After Olivia had eaten, Mrs. Campbell showed her to her room on the second floor. It was small but charming, with a comfortable-looking bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked a small garden bursting with roses and lavender. Harlan carried her bag upstairs and set it on the chair near the window. Thank you, Olivia said, looking at Harlan with an expression of profound gratitude. I do not know how I can ever repay your kindness. You already started to smile, Harlan said. That is payment enough for now. Get some rest, Miss Nelson. Things always look better after a good night's sleep. He left her there and went back downstairs to settle accounts with Mrs. Campbell. After paying for 2 weeks in advance, despite the older woman's protests, he headed out into the warm evening air. His stomach growled, reminding him that he had not eaten since noon, so he made his way to the Sunrise restaurant, a small establishment run by a Chinese immigrant family that served the best food in town. As he ate his dinner of beef stew and cornbread, Harlan found his thoughts constantly drifting back to Olivia. He kept seeing her face as it had been when he first spotted her by the river, crumpled with despair, and then how she had looked when she finally smiled after skipping that stone across the water. He was 31 years old and had known plenty of women in his life, but none had ever affected him quite this way so quickly. He told himself it was just sympathy, that any decent person would feel moved by her plight. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. There was something about Olivia Nelson that had reached past all his carefully constructed walls and touched something he had thought long dead. After his sister's death and the end of a painful relationship with a woman in Sacramento who had chosen a wealthy banker over him, Harlan had convinced himself that he was better off alone. Simpler that way. Less risk of getting hurt. But now, sitting in the restaurant with the buzz of conversation around him, he found himself thinking about the future in a way he had not in years. He wondered what Olivia's laugh would sound like when she was truly happy. He wondered what her hair would look like down, flowing free in the sunlight. He wondered if she liked horses, if she could ride, what her favorite color was, what made her passionate, what her dreams were beyond the ones that had just been shattered. You are brooding, Harlan. That is never a good sign. Harlan looked up to see his friend Daniel Hawthorne sliding into the seat across from him. Daniel was a deputy sheriff, a good man who had helped Harlan out of a tight spot or two over the years. They had met during a cattle drive 5 years ago and had maintained a solid friendship ever since. Just thinking, Harlan said, about the pretty auburn-haired woman you were seen escorting to Mrs. Campbell's boarding house. Daniel grinned. You know how fast news travels in this town. Harlan sighed. Her name is Olivia Nelson. She came from Boston to marry Gerald Whitmore, only to discover he is a thief and a liar who left town weeks ago. Daniel's grin faded. Whitmore, that bastard skipped out owing money all over town. Sheriff Bryant has been looking for him, but he is long gone. Probably in Mexico by now. He shook his head. She came all the way from Boston for him. That is rough. She is stranded here with no money and no prospects, Harlan said. I found her crying by the river. I could not just leave her there. Of course you could not, Daniel said. That is why you are a good man. He paused, studying Harlan's face. But I am sensing there is more to this than just good Samaritan behavior. Harlan did not answer immediately. He took a drink of his coffee and considered his words carefully. I just met her, Daniel, but there is something about her. I cannot explain it. You do not have to explain it, Daniel said. I saw Margaret Henderson and knew I was going to marry her about 5 minutes after we met. Sometimes you just know, he smiled. Of course, it took me 3 months to convince her, but that is beside the point. I am not talking about marriage, Harlan protested. I am just talking about helping someone in need. Sure you are, Daniel said, not bothering to hide his amusement. Well, if you want to help her, she is going to need work. My Margaret mentioned just yesterday that the general store is looking for someone to help with the books and customer service. Old Mr. Patterson's arthritis is getting bad, and his daughter moved to San Francisco last year. He is struggling to keep up. Harlan leaned forward. Do you think he would hire Olivia? I do not see why not if she is qualified. Why do not you bring her by tomorrow? I will put in a good word. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. Just remember me when you are naming your first child, Daniel said with a wink. Harlan threw a wadded napkin at him, but he was smiling despite himself. After Daniel left, Harlan finished his meal and then walked to the livery stable where he boarded his horse. The stable owner, an older black man named Thomas Freeman who had come west after the war seeking a fresh start, greeted him warmly. Evening, Harlan. Your horse has been well taken care of. Good animal you have got there. Thanks, Thomas. How is business? Cannot complain. Got 3 new horses boarded this week, and I just sold a good mare to a rancher from up north. Thomas paused. I heard you helped a young woman today, the one that Whitmore fellow was supposed to marry. Word really does travel fast, Harlan muttered. Thomas chuckled. This is Chico. If you sneeze on one end of town, they say God bless you on the other end before you can blink. His expression grew more serious. That was a good thing you did, son. A lot of men would have just ridden on by. I could not do that, I know. That is what makes you different. Thomas leaned against the stable door. You know, my wife Sarah has been talking about hiring some help at the house. She takes in laundry and does mending for folks, and business has picked up so much she can barely keep up. If your young lady needs work, send her our way. Sarah would be glad for the help and would treat her fair. I will let her know, Harlan said, feeling grateful for the good people in his life. Thank you, Thomas. We all need help sometimes, Thomas said, and we should all be willing to give it when we can. That is what makes a community. Harlan made his way to his own small house on the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, just 3 rooms and a small porch, but it was his, and he had built most of it with his own hands. He lit the oil lamp and sat on the porch, smoking his pipe and watching the stars come out. The night was clear and warm, with a slight breeze carrying the scent of wild sage and grass. He thought about Olivia in her room at the boarding house, wondered if she was sleeping or lying awake worrying about her future. He wished he could do more, wished he could simply fix everything for her. But life was rarely that simple, especially on the frontier where fortunes could change in a heartbeat, and luck was often the difference between success and failure. Still, he was determined to help her however he could. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin, past his defenses, and settled somewhere near his heart. He barely knew her, and yet he felt protective of her in a way that surprised him with its intensity. Sleep did not come easily that night. Harlan lay in his bed, listening to the sounds of the night, and found himself making plans. He would take Olivia to meet Mr. Patterson at the general store in the morning. If that did not work out, he would introduce her to Thomas's wife, Sarah. Someone in this town needed help, and Olivia needed work. He would find a way to match those two needs. When morning came, Harlan was up with the sun. He washed, shaved carefully, and put on his better shirt, the blue one with the silver buttons that his sister had given him for Christmas years ago. He told himself he was just being presentable, but he knew he was trying to look nice for Olivia. He arrived at the boarding house just as Mrs. Campbell was setting out breakfast for her residents. The older woman gave him a knowing look when she saw him, but said nothing. A few minutes later, Olivia came down the stairs and Harlan felt his breath catch. She looked rested, her hair neatly pinned up, her dress brushed clean. Her eyes were still sad, but there was a determined set to her shoulders that had not been there the day before. "Good morning, Mr. Emerson," she said. "Good morning, Miss Nelson. I hope you slept well. Better than I expected, actually. Mrs. Campbell has been very kind." Olivia glanced at the older woman with genuine warmth. "She brought me tea this morning and told me about some potential opportunities for work." "That is actually why I am here," Harlan said. "If you are willing, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Patterson, who owns the general store. He needs help with his books and customers, and I thought you might be a good fit." Hope flickered across Olivia's face. "Really? He would consider hiring me?" "There is only one way to find out," Harlan said. "Are you ready to go?" Olivia nodded quickly. She grabbed a shawl from the coat rack near the door and followed Harlan out into the morning sunshine. The town was already busy with activity. Wagons rolled down the main street, merchants were opening their shops, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. Patterson's general store was in the heart of town, a large building with windows displaying everything from fabric to tools to canned goods. A bell jangled when Harlan opened the door, and they stepped into the cluttered but organized interior. Shelves lined every wall, stocked with goods of every description. Behind the main counter stood elderly Mr. Patterson, his white hair wild around his head, his gnarled hands carefully measuring out sugar for a customer. "Be with you in just a moment," he called out. They waited while he finished with the customer, and then Mr. Patterson turned his attention to them. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, took in Olivia with interest. "Morning, Harlan. And who is this young lady?" "Mr. Patterson, this is Miss Olivia Nelson. She recently arrived from Boston and is looking for employment. I heard you might need some help around the store." Mr. Patterson's eyes lit up. "Boston, you say? Can you read and write, Miss Nelson? Do figures?" "Yes, sir," Olivia said, her voice steady and clear. "I attended school through the 12th grade and worked as an assistant to a bookkeeper in Boston for 3 years. I can manage inventory, keep ledgers, and handle customer transactions. I am also a quick learner and not afraid of hard work." "Well now, that is music to my ears," Mr. Patterson said. "Come around the counter here and let me show you my ledger system. It is organized, but my daughter used to help me keep it all straight, and since she left, I have been falling behind." Olivia glanced at Harlan, who gave her an encouraging nod. She walked around the counter and spent the next 20 minutes with Mr. Patterson, examining his books and asking intelligent questions. Harlan watched her confidence grow as she became absorbed in the work. She pointed out a few mathematical errors with tactful politeness and suggested a more efficient way to track inventory. Mr. Patterson was clearly impressed. "Miss Nelson, I would be honored to have you working here. The pay is $1 a day, 6 days a week, and you would work from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening with an hour break for lunch. Does that sound acceptable?" Olivia's face broke into a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made them sparkle. "That sounds more than acceptable, Mr. Patterson. Thank you so much. When would you like me to start? How about right now?" Mr. Patterson said. "No time like the present, and I've got 3 months of backed-up bookkeeping that needs attention." "I would be delighted," Olivia said. She turned to Harlan, and the gratitude in her eyes made his chest tighten. "Thank you, Mr. Emerson. I truly cannot thank you enough." "Just seeing you smile makes it worthwhile," Harlan said softly, meaning every word. He left the store feeling lighter than he had in years. Olivia was going to be all right. She had a job, a place to stay, and the beginning of a fresh start. He should have felt satisfied that he had done his good deed and could now move on with his life. Instead, he found himself already planning when he could see her again. The days that followed fell into a pleasant pattern. Harlan made excuses to stop by the general store several times a week. He needed nails for a repair on his porch. He needed coffee. He needed thread to mend a torn shirt, even though he had never mended anything in his life and ended up asking Mrs. Campbell to do it for him. Each visit gave him a chance to see Olivia, to talk with her, to watch her confidence grow as she settled into her new role. Mr. Patterson sang her praises to anyone who would listen. She had reorganized his entire inventory system, caught several suppliers who had been overcharging him, and increased his sales by being friendly and helpful to customers. The townspeople quickly took a liking to her, appreciating her intelligence and kindness. Harlan learned more about her with each conversation. She loved reading, especially poetry and adventure novels. Her favorite color was the deep blue of the sky just after sunset. She missed the ocean from her time in Boston, but was learning to love the wide open spaces of California. She had always wanted to learn to ride a horse, but had never had the opportunity. Her parents had been kind but poor, her father a clerk and her mother a seamstress, and they had worked hard to give her an education. The more Harlan learned about Olivia, the more he found himself falling for her. It was different from anything he had experienced before, deeper and more genuine. He loved the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she furrowed her brow when she was concentrating on a difficult calculation, the way she treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of their station in life. He loved her strength, the way she had picked herself up from devastation and rebuilt her life in a strange new place. But he held back from expressing his feelings, worried that she might not be ready for romance so soon after her betrayal by Whitmore. He did not want to be another man taking advantage of her vulnerable position. So he continued his visits, letting their friendship deepen naturally, content to simply be near her. One warm Saturday afternoon in late July, Harlan gathered his courage and approached Olivia as she was leaving the general store for the day. She looked tired but happy, her face flushed from the warmth of the store. "Good evening, Miss Nelson. You look like you could use some fresh air and a break from ledgers." "You have no idea," Olivia said with a laugh. "We had a busier day than usual. I think half the county came in to buy supplies." "Would you do me the honor of accompanying me on a ride?" Harlan asked. "I thought perhaps you would like to see some of the countryside, and I could teach you the basics of riding if you are interested." Olivia's face lit up. "I would love that, but I should warn you, I have no experience with horses whatsoever. They are so large and intimidating." "So was bookkeeping for Mr. Patterson until you mastered it," Harlan said. "Come on. I have a very gentle mare at Thomas's stable who would be perfect for a beginner." 20 minutes later, they stood in the stable yard while Harlan saddled 2 horses. Olivia watched with fascination as he worked, asking questions about the different pieces of tack and their purposes. He brought out Daisy, a calm bay mare with patient eyes, and introduced her to Olivia. "Hold out your hand flat like this, with the apple slice on your palm," Harlan instructed. "Let her come to you." Olivia did as he said, her hand trembling slightly. Daisy approached gently and took the apple with delicate lips, and Olivia let out a delighted laugh. "Oh, her mouth is so soft. I thought it would be different somehow." "Horses are gentle creatures if you treat them right," Harlan said. He spent the next few minutes teaching Olivia how to approach Daisy, how to touch her, how to let the horse become accustomed to her presence. Then he helped Olivia into the saddle, his hand steadying her waist as she settled onto the mare's back. "Oh my," Olivia said, gripping the saddle horn tightly. "I am very high up." "You are doing great," Harlan assured her. "Just relax and let your body move with the horse. I am going to lead Daisy around the yard first, nice and slow." He took the reins and walked Daisy in a circle, watching Olivia carefully. She was tense at first, her body rigid, but gradually she began to relax and find the rhythm of the horse's movement. After several circles, Harlan handed her the reins and taught her the basic commands. By the time an hour had passed, Olivia was walking Daisy around the yard on her own, her face glowing with pride and exhilaration. "I am riding a horse," she said, as if she could not quite believe it. "Harlan, I am actually riding a horse." "You are a natural," Harlan said, and he meant it. She had good instincts and a light touch on the reins. "Ready to go for a real ride. We will stay at a walk and I will be right beside you the whole time." They rode out of town together, taking a trail that wound along the base of the foothills. The late afternoon sun painted everything in golden light, and the air smelled of dry grass and wildflowers. Harlan kept his horse close to Olivia's, ready to help if she needed it, but she managed beautifully. She was concentrating hard, but there was joy on her face that made Harlan's heart swell. They rode for about an hour, not going far but taking time to stop and enjoy the views. At one point, they dismounted near a grove of oak trees and let the horses graze while they sat in the shade. Olivia was full of questions about the landscape, the wildlife, the way of life in California. Harlan answered as best he could, enjoying her curiosity and intelligence. "Thank you for this," Olivia said eventually, leaning back against a tree trunk. "I have been so focused on work and getting established that I forgot to just enjoy being alive. This is beautiful." "It is," Harlan agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the scenery. Olivia turned her head and caught his gaze. Something passed between them, something electric and undeniable. The moment stretched out, and Harlan found himself leaning slightly closer. Then Olivia's eyes widened and she looked away, color flooding her cheeks. "We should probably head back," she said quietly. "It will be dark soon." Harlan felt the moment slip away and tried not to feel too disappointed. He helped her back onto Daisy and they rode back to town in comfortable silence. When they reached the boarding house, Harlan helped Olivia dismount, his hands lingering on her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for today," Olivia said. "It was wonderful." "We can do it again anytime you like," Harlan said. "You are welcome to ride Daisy whenever you want." "I would like that very much." Olivia hesitated, then reached out and touched his arm gently. "Harlan, you have been so kind to me, more than kind. I do not know what I did to deserve such a good friend, but I am grateful every day, friend." The word stung more than Harlan expected, but he smiled and nodded. "You deserve kindness, Olivia. Never doubt that." He watched her go inside, then rode back to the stable with his thoughts in turmoil. He was falling in love with her, had probably already fallen, but he did not know how she felt. Was she holding back because of Whitmore? Was she not interested in him that way? Or was she just being cautious, taking time to heal before opening her heart again? Thomas was still at the stable when Harlan returned. The older man took one look at his face and shook his head with a knowing smile. "You have got it bad, son." "Is it that obvious?" Harlan asked, to anyone with eyes. "Does she know how you feel?" "I do not think so. I am trying to give her time, let her recover from what Whitmore did to her. I do not want to rush her or make her uncomfortable." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That is wise. But do not wait too long, Harlan. Life is short and love is precious. When you know, you need to say something, otherwise you might lose your chance." Harlan took those words to heart over the following weeks. He continued to spend time with Olivia, their friendship deepening with each passing day. They went on more riding lessons, and Olivia's skills improved rapidly. They had dinner together several times at the restaurant, talking for hours about everything and nothing. They attended a church social together, where Harlan experienced the fierce and unexpected jealousy of watching other men ask Olivia to dance. She had become a part of the fabric of his life, woven so deeply into his daily routine that he could not imagine his days without her. He found himself sharing things with her that he had never told anyone, old hurts and hopes and dreams. She listened with genuine interest and shared her own stories in return. The walls they had both built around their hearts were slowly crumbling, brick by brick. It was mid-August when things came to a head. Harlan had been hired to help with a cattle drive to Sacramento, a job that would take him away for at least 2 weeks. The night before he was to leave, he went to the boarding house to say goodbye to Olivia. "Mrs. Campbell let him in with a smile and pointed to the back garden, where Olivia was sitting on a bench reading by the last light of the day. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and her smile when she saw him made his heart race. "Harlan, I was hoping you would come by. Mrs. Campbell made blackberry pie, and there is a slice with your name on it." "That sounds wonderful, but I actually came to tell you something," Harlan said, sitting beside her on the bench. "I am leaving tomorrow for a cattle drive to Sacramento. I will be gone for about 2 weeks. The smile faded from Olivia's face. 2 weeks? That is a long time, I know, but it is good money and I need to go. Harlan took a deep breath. "Olivia, I need to tell you something before I leave, and I am just going to say it plainly because I am not good with fancy words." "Harlan, you are worrying me." "What is it?" He turned to face her fully, taking her hand in his. "I am in love with you, Olivia. I know we have not known each other very long, and I know you have been through a terrible experience with Whitmore. But I cannot leave tomorrow without telling you how I feel. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing on my mind before I sleep. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me want to be a better man, and if you do not feel the same way, that is all right. I will understand, but I needed you to know." Olivia's eyes had grown wide, her hand trembling in his. For a long moment she said nothing, and Harlan felt his heart sinking. Then tears began to roll down her cheeks, and he felt panic grip him. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "I should not have said anything. Please forget I mentioned it." "No," Olivia said, her voice choked with emotion. "No, Harlan, you do not understand. I am crying because I feel the same way, and I was so afraid that you only saw me as a charity case, someone you helped out of pity." Harlan felt as if the world had stopped spinning. "You feel the same way?" "Yes," Olivia said, laughing through her tears. "I have been falling in love with you since that day by the river when you sat with me and skipped stones until I could smile again. You are the kindest, most genuine man I have ever known. When I think about Gerald Whitmore now, I just feel grateful, because if he had not betrayed me, I never would have found you." Harlan cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Can I kiss you?" "Please," Olivia whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but she met him halfway. Their lips touched gently at first, tentatively, and then with growing confidence and passion. It was everything Harlan had imagined and more, sweet and tender and perfect. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I do not want you to go tomorrow," Olivia said, resting her forehead against his. "I do not want to go either," Harlan admitted. "But I will be back before you know it, and then we can figure out what comes next. Together." "Together," Olivia repeated, and the word sounded like a promise. They spent the rest of the evening in the garden, talking and stealing kisses, making plans for when Harlan returned. When he finally forced himself to leave, Olivia walked him to the gate, their fingers intertwined. "Be safe," she said. "Come back to me." "Nothing could keep me away," Harlan promised. The cattle drive was one of the longest 2 weeks of Harlan's life. The work was hard and dusty, the days long and hot, but none of it bothered him the way it usually would. He was sustained by thoughts of Olivia, by the memory of her kiss, by the knowledge that she loved him. He found himself grinning at odd moments, which earned him good-natured ribbing from the other cowboys. "You look like a man who left his heart behind," one of them commented around the campfire one night. "I did," Harlan admitted freely. "And I cannot wait to get back to her." The drive went smoothly, and they made it to Sacramento ahead of schedule. Harlan collected his pay and immediately started the journey back to Chico, pushing harder than he needed to because he was eager to see Olivia. When he finally rode into town, dusty and tired, but elated, the first thing he did was go to the general store. Mr. Patterson greeted him with a knowing smile. "She just stepped out for lunch. You will find her at the restaurant." Harlan practically ran to the restaurant, bursting through the door with enough force to make several diners look up in surprise. Olivia was sitting at a table near the window with Mrs. Campbell, and when she saw him, her face lit up like the sunrise. She stood up so fast, she nearly knocked over her chair and ran to him, propriety forgotten. Harlan caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. She laughed, her arms tight around his neck, and when he set her down, he kissed her right there in front of everyone. There were gasps and whispers, and at least one scandalized, "Well, I never." But Harlan did not care. Let the whole town talk. He loved this woman, and he was not going to hide it. "I missed you," Olivia said when they finally came up for air. "I missed you too, every single minute." Harlan kept his arms around her, unwilling to let her go. "Olivia Nelson, I know this is fast and probably crazy, but I am too old and have seen too much to waste time on being sensible." "Will you marry me?" More gasps from the other diners. Mrs. Campbell was beaming. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, the happy kind, and she nodded vigorously. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Harlan kissed her again, and this time there was applause mixed in with the whispers. Mrs. Campbell was dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Even the restaurant owner was smiling as he brought out a bottle of wine on the house to celebrate. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. The whole town seemed to get involved, everyone eager to help and be part of the celebration. Mrs. Campbell insisted on hosting the reception at the boarding house. The ladies at the church sewing circle made Olivia a beautiful dress from cream-colored silk that one of them had been saving for a special occasion. Thomas Freeman offered his stable yard for the ceremony itself, decorating it with ribbons and wildflowers until it looked like something from a fairy tale. Olivia glowed with happiness during those weeks, all traces of the heartbroken woman Harlan had found by the river completely gone. She threw herself into planning the wedding with enthusiasm, but also into planning their life together. She and Harlan spent hours talking about their dreams, their hopes for the future. They decided that Olivia would continue working at the general store for now, since she loved it, and they could use the income. They talked about eventually buying some land and starting a small ranch. They talked about children, a home full of laughter and love. Harlan's house needed work to accommodate a wife, so he spent his evenings repairing and improving it. He added a proper kitchen, fixed the roof, built a new porch, and even attempted to plant a small garden, though he had no idea what he was doing and had to ask several people for advice. Daniel Hawthorne helped him paint the exterior a cheerful white, and Thomas gave him an old but beautiful rocking chair that had belonged to his grandmother. "For your wife," Thomas said. "Every woman needs a good rocking chair." The wedding took place on a warm September afternoon, exactly 3 months after Harlan had first found Olivia crying by the river. The stable yard was packed with people, seemingly everyone in Chico, and a good number from the surrounding areas. Harlan stood at the front in his best suit, his hands trembling slightly with nerves and anticipation. Then Olivia appeared, walking down the makeshift aisle with Mrs. Campbell at her side, and Harlan forgot how to breathe. She was breathtaking in her cream dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers, her face radiant with joy. When she reached him and took his hands, he felt complete in a way he had never experienced before. The ceremony was short and sweet, performed by the local minister. They exchanged simple gold bands that Harlan had purchased with his earnings from the cattle drive. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and told Harlan he could kiss his bride, the cheer that went up from the crowd could probably be heard clear across town. The reception was a joyous affair with music, dancing, and more food than seemed possible. Harlan danced with his new wife again and again, unable to stop smiling. At one point, Daniel raised a toast. To Harlan and Olivia, may their life together be as full of love as their beginning. And may Harlan never forget that he owes me for introducing him to Mr. Patterson. Everyone laughed and drank, and the party continued late into the evening. But eventually, Harlan and Olivia slipped away to their little house on the edge of town, ready to begin their life together. Their first year of marriage was one of adjustment and discovery, joy and occasional challenges, but always with love at the center. Olivia continued to excel at the general store, and Mr. Patterson came to rely on her so much that he eventually made her a partner in the business. Harlan took on various jobs, from cattle drives to helping build new structures in the rapidly growing town. Together, they saved their money carefully, planning for their future. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small quirks that made them who they were. Harlan discovered that Olivia sang while she cooked, that she hogged the blankets at night, that she had a terrible weakness for peppermint candy. Olivia learned that Harlan talked to his horse as if it were a person, that he could not function in the morning until he had coffee, that he had nightmares sometimes about his sister's death, but felt better when she held him. They had their first argument 3 months in, about something ridiculous that neither of them could even remember later. But they learned how to fight fair, how to communicate, how to apologize and forgive. They learned that love was not just the grand romantic gestures, but also the small daily kindnesses, the patience, the willingness to grow together. In the spring of 1879, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Harlan one evening after dinner, simply setting down her fork and looking at him with shining eyes. "I have news," she said. "You are going to be a father." Harlan's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He jumped up from his chair so fast he knocked it over, pulled Olivia into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. Then he knelt down and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach, as if he could hear the baby already. "Hello in there," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I already love you more than I knew was possible." Olivia ran her fingers through his hair, her own eyes wet with happy tears. "We are going to have a family, Harlan, a real family." "We already are a family," Harlan said, looking up at her. "But I am very excited about making it bigger." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia continued working at the general store until she was 7 months along, when Mr. Patterson gently insisted she take time off to rest. She spent those final months preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, setting up the small room that would be the nursery. Harlan was hilariously overprotective, constantly worrying about her, bringing her things she did not need, refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a teacup. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Olivia told him one day with exasperated affection. "I know, but you are carrying the most precious cargo in the world," Harlan replied stubbornly. Their son was born on a cold November night in 1879, after a labor that lasted nearly 12 hours and aged Harlan several years. He paced outside the bedroom while Mrs. Campbell and the midwife tended to Olivia, nearly wearing a hole in the floor. When he finally heard the cry of a baby and was allowed in, he found Olivia exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly. Harlan approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blanket. He felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. This was his child, his son, part of him and part of Olivia, a living representation of their love. "He is perfect," Harlan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. What should we call him? They had discussed names for months, unable to agree. But now, looking at her husband's face shining with love and wonder, Olivia knew exactly what his name should be. "Henry," she said. "Henry James Emerson." "After my father," Harlan said, looking at her with surprised delight. His father had died when he was young, but he had loved him deeply. "He should have a strong name from a good man," Olivia said, "and our son is going to be both." Harlan carefully took the baby from her arms, supporting his tiny head the way Mrs. Campbell had shown him. Little Henry opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to look directly at his father. Something passed between them, a bond being forged that would last a lifetime. "Hello, Henry," Harlan said softly. "I am your papa. I am going to do my best to be the father you deserve. I am going to teach you about honor and kindness and how to treat people right. I am going to show you how to ride and rope and all the practical things. But most importantly, I am going to show you every single day that you are loved beyond measure." Watching her husband with their son, Olivia felt her heart might burst with happiness. This was what she had dreamed of all those years ago in Boston, the family and love she had hoped to build. Gerald Whitmore had promised her these things, but had given her nothing but lies. Harlan had promised her nothing at first, had simply offered her kindness when she needed it most, but had given her everything. The first year of Henry's life was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Sleep became a rare commodity, and their carefully ordered life descended into controlled chaos. But neither Harlan nor Olivia would have traded it for anything. Harlan proved to be a devoted father, getting up for night feedings even though Olivia nursed the baby, just to keep her company and help however he could. He changed diapers without complaint, sang off key lullabies, and could often be found standing over the cradle watching Henry sleep with an expression of pure wonder. Olivia returned to work at the general store part-time when Henry was 6 months old, bringing the baby with her. Mr. Patterson was delighted to have both of them there, and Henry became something of a mascot for the store. Customers loved to stop and coo over him, and he rewarded them with gummy smiles and happy babbles. By 1881, Harlan and Olivia had saved enough money to buy a parcel of land about 3 miles outside of Chico. It was beautiful property with a creek running through it, good grazing land, and a small grove of oak trees. They began building their dream, starting with a modest house that Harlan constructed largely himself with help from friends. It had a real kitchen, 3 bedrooms, a sitting room, and a large front porch. It was not fancy, but it was solid and comfortable and theirs. They started their ranch with just a dozen cattle and a few chickens, but it was a beginning. Olivia handled the business side, keeping meticulous records and managing their finances with the same skill she had brought to Mr. Patterson's store. Harlan did the physical work, building fences, tending the animals, and slowly expanding their operation. It was hard work, but they were building something together, and that made every difficult day worthwhile. In the fall of 1882, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth. She came into the world easier than Henry had, announcing her presence with lusty cries that made everyone laugh. Henry, now nearly 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything and constantly trying to share his toys with her, even though she was too little to play. "Be gentle, Henry," Olivia instructed as he petted his sister's head with the same enthusiasm he used on their barn cat. "I love her, Mama," Henry said seriously. "I am going to protect her forever." Harlan, watching this exchange, felt his chest tighten with pride. His son was growing into a kind, caring child, and he knew that was largely thanks to Olivia's influence and the loving home they had built together. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. They acquired more cattle, added some horses, and began growing hay to sell to other ranchers. Olivia convinced Harlan to let her start a small vegetable garden, which quickly expanded into a large one that produced more than they could eat, allowing them to sell the surplus in town. Henry started school in Chico, riding in with his father 3 days a week. He was bright and curious, constantly asking questions about everything. Rose was equally intelligent but more reserved, content to observe and think before acting. The siblings adored each other, their bond strong despite the occasional argument over toys or who got to sit next to Papa at dinner. In the spring of 1885, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was less of a surprise, but no less welcome. Their third child, another son they named Thomas Daniel after the 2 men who had helped them so much in those early days, arrived that December. He was a quiet baby who rarely cried, but when he smiled, it was like sunshine breaking through clouds. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. The children grew like wildflowers, each developing their own distinct personalities. Henry became the responsible oldest, always looking out for his younger siblings. Rose was the peacemaker and the dreamer, often found reading under a tree or making up elaborate stories. Thomas was the adventurer, constantly getting into mischief and giving his parents gray hairs with his fearless explorations. Harlan and Olivia's love continued to deepen and mature. They had been through so much together. The challenges of building a life from scratch, the fears and joys of parenthood, the hard work of making a ranch successful. They had weathered illnesses, bad seasons, financial difficulties, and all the countless small struggles that made up a life. But through it all, they had each other. On quiet evenings after the children were in bed, they would sit on their porch in the rocking chairs and watch the stars come out. Sometimes they talked about the day, their plans for the future, or memories of the past. Sometimes they simply sat in companionable silence, hands linked, content in each other's presence. "You ever think about that day by the river?" Olivia asked one such evening in the summer of 1888. "All the time," Harlan admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding on by, deciding it was not my business, not my problem. If I had made that choice, I would have missed out on everything that makes my life worth living. I think about how destroyed I felt that day, Olivia said. I thought my life was over, that I had made a terrible mistake coming west and had nothing left. I could never have imagined that, 10 years later, I would be sitting here on a porch of a house I love, with 3 beautiful children sleeping inside, married to the man of my dreams. Sometimes I want to go back and tell that crying girl by the river that everything is going to be okay. Better than okay. You did not need anyone to tell you, Harlan said, squeezing her hand. You picked yourself up and made it okay. You are the strongest person I know, Olivia. I had help, she said, smiling at him. Someone sat with me until I could smile again. Someone showed me that there was still kindness in the world, still reasons to hope. You gave me just as much, Harlan insisted. Before you, I was going through the motions of living but not really feeling anything. I had convinced myself that being alone was easier, safer. You taught me that love is worth the risk, that opening your heart is the bravest thing you can do. They sat together as the stars came out, the same way they had on countless other nights, the same way they would on countless nights to come. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, their ranch was peaceful and prosperous. Behind them lay 10 years of marriage, of building a life together. Ahead lay whatever the future would bring, and they would face it together. In 1890, Mr. Patterson finally retired fully from the general store, selling his half of the business to Olivia. She hired 2 assistants to help run the day-to-day operations, allowing her to spend more time at the ranch while still maintaining her hand in the business she loved. The store continued to thrive under her ownership, becoming one of the most successful in the county. That same year, Henry turned 11 and started talking about wanting to learn to be a real cowboy like his father. Harlan began teaching him in earnest, showing him how to rope and ride, how to read cattle, how to fix fences, and all the countless skills necessary for ranching. He also taught him the values that mattered most: honesty, hard work, respect for others, and the importance of treating women with dignity. A real man is not measured by how tough he is or how many fights he wins, Harlan told his son one day as they mended a fence together. A real man is measured by how he treats people who cannot do anything for him, by whether he keeps his word, by whether he stands up for what is right even when it is hard. Like when you helped Mama, Henry said. You did not have to, but you did because it was right. Exactly. And that one choice led to the best decision I ever made, Harlan said. Always be willing to help people, Henry. You never know how much it might matter. Rose, at 8 years old, was already showing a keen interest in the business side of things. She spent hours looking over Olivia's ledgers, asking questions about accounting and inventory management. Olivia taught her patiently, delighted to have a child who shared her interests. They talked about Rose perhaps taking over the store one day, or starting her own business, dreams that seemed ambitious for a girl, but that both Olivia and Harlan encouraged fully. Young Thomas, at 5, was still mostly interested in exploring and playing, but he showed early promise with horses. He had no fear of them, and they seemed to respond to him with unusual gentleness. Harlan had a feeling his youngest son might become the best horseman in the family. In 1893, Chico celebrated its 40th anniversary as an incorporated city. There was a large celebration with a parade, speeches, and a community picnic. Harlan and Olivia attended with their children, enjoying the festivities and meeting up with old friends. Daniel Hawthorne was there with his wife Margaret and their 4 children. Thomas Freeman had passed away the previous year, but his wife Sarah was there, still taking in laundry at 72 years old and as sharp as ever. Mrs. Campbell, now in her 70s, held court at the picnic like a beloved grandmother to the entire town. As Harlan watched his children run and play with the other kids, as he stood with his arm around his wife and talked with friends and neighbors, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. This community had embraced them, helped them, supported them as they built their life. Chico had become home in the deepest sense of the word. That evening, after they returned to the ranch and put exhausted children to bed, Harlan and Olivia returned to their familiar spot on the porch. 15 years had passed since that day by the river, 15 years of marriage and partnership and love. They were both older now, with lines on their faces and silver threads in their hair, but Harlan thought Olivia was more beautiful than ever. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close. "Unbelievably so," Olivia replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to wake up next to you every morning, that I get to watch our children grow, that I get to build dreams with you." "I love you," Harlan said simply. "More every day, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Olivia assured him, "because I feel the same way." The years continued to pass, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that are part of every life. In 1895, they lost their first cattle to a bad winter, a financial blow that was difficult but not devastating thanks to their careful savings and Olivia's business acumen. In 1896, Henry was kicked by a horse and broke his arm, giving everyone a terrible scare but ultimately healing perfectly. In 1897, Rose won a mathematics competition at school, receiving a ribbon and $5 that she immediately insisted on putting into a savings account for college. By the turn of the century, the Emerson Ranch had become one of the most respected operations in the region. They ran over 100 head of cattle, had a dozen horses including several that Thomas had trained himself, and grew enough hay and vegetables to have a thriving secondary business. The original modest house had been expanded twice and now had 6 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a formal dining room, and even a small library that Olivia had insisted on and that Rose spent most of her free time in. Henry was nearly 21, a capable young man who had grown into his father's height and his mother's intelligence. He had started courting a sweet girl named Emma from town, and Harlan suspected an engagement was not far off. Rose was 18 and had been accepted to a women's college in San Francisco, a groundbreaking achievement that made both her parents immensely proud, even though they would miss her terribly. Thomas was 15, all gangly limbs and big dreams, talking about maybe starting his own horse training business someday. In the summer of 1901, Olivia and Harlan celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary with a party that their children organized as a surprise. Friends and family filled the ranch, the house overflowing with love and laughter. Someone had even managed to track down Sarah Freeman, now in her 80s but still spry, who regaled everyone with stories of the early days. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Harlan found himself once again by the river with Olivia. It was the same spot where they had met all those years ago, the water flowing over the same smooth stones, the same cottonwood trees providing shade. But everything else had changed, transformed by time and love and the life they had built together. "You remember what I said to you that first day?" Harlan asked. "Right here in this spot." "You said a lot of things," Olivia replied with a smile. "But I remember you said I looked like someone carrying a heavy burden and that tears sometimes lighten the load." "I also said you were not alone," Harlan reminded her, "that we would figure it out together." "And we did," Olivia said softly. "We figured out everything together. We still do." Harlan pulled her into his arms, holding her close and breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every single moment, every challenge, every hard day, because they all led to us, to the life we have. So would I, Olivia agreed. Even the hard parts, because they made us stronger. Even the scary parts, because they taught us to rely on each other. Even the boring, everyday parts, because that is where real life happens. They stood there by the river as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. They were no longer the young man and woman who had met here in 1878, desperate and hopeful in equal measure. They were parents and business owners, pillars of their community, partners in every sense of the word. They had gray in their hair and lines on their faces, calluses on their hands and sometimes aches in their bones. They had buried friends and celebrated births, survived hard times and enjoyed good times. But through it all, they had loved each other. That had been the foundation of everything, the constant that made all the variables manageable. Love had taken them from that first meeting by the river to this life they had built together, and love would carry them forward through whatever years remained. As they walked back to the ranch house, hand in hand, Harlan looked at their home glowing with lamplight in the gathering dusk. He could see Henry through one window, probably reading before bed. Rose's silhouette passed by another window, perhaps still studying even during the summer break. Thomas was likely already asleep, exhausted from a day of working with the horses. This was his life. This was what that single choice, that decision to stop and sit with a crying woman by a river, had led to. Everything he valued, everything he loved, everything that gave his existence meaning had flowed from that one moment of simple human kindness. "Thank you," Olivia said suddenly. "For what? For stopping that day. For sitting with me. For not giving up on me even when I had given up on myself." She squeezed his hand. "For loving me." "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done," Harlan said honestly. "From the moment I saw you smile that first time when you skipped that stone across the water, I was lost. Best thing that ever happened to me." They reached the porch, and before going inside they paused for one more kiss, as sweet and tender as the first one had been in Mrs. Campbell's garden all those years ago. Some things never changed, and the magic between them was one of those constants. Inside, they checked on their children as they did every night. Henry was indeed reading some thick book about ranching techniques. He looked up and smiled when they peeked in. "Good night, Mama. Good night, Papa." Rose was at her desk, working on something by lamplight. "I am almost done," she promised before they could tell her to sleep. Thomas was indeed asleep, sprawled across his bed with one arm hanging off the side, his dog curled up on the floor nearby, in their own room. Harlan and Olivia got ready for bed with the comfortable ease of long practice. They settled under the quilts that Olivia had made years ago, fitting together in the way of couples who had shared a bed for over 2 decades. "You think we did all right?" Olivia asked softly in the darkness. "With the children, with the ranch, with everything." "I think we did better than all right," Harlan replied. "I think we built something real and good. Our children are kind, intelligent, hardworking people. Our ranch is successful and honest. We have contributed to our community. And through it all, we loved each other and showed our children what a real marriage looks like." He paused. "Yeah, I think we did all right." Olivia snuggled closer and Harlan wrapped his arms around her, marveling as he always did at how perfectly she fit against him. They had years ahead of them still, grandchildren to spoil, adventures to have, challenges to face. Life was not done with them yet. But whatever came, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, with love, with determination, and with the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be, with exactly who they were meant to be with. As Harlan drifted off to sleep, his last conscious thought was of that first day by the river, of a crying woman who needed help and a cowboy who decided to sit with her until she smiled. That simple act of kindness had changed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted, had set in motion a love story that spanned decades and generations. And somewhere in the night, the river continued to flow over smooth stones, endless and eternal, a witness to the beginning of something beautiful that would last far beyond its waters. The seasons continued their eternal dance. Winter came with its cold beauty, spring with its renewal, summer with its abundance, and fall with its golden harvest. Each season brought the Emerson family together in different ways, celebrating holidays and milestones, working through challenges, and building memories that would last lifetimes. In the spring of 1903, Henry married his Emma in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. The whole town turned out for the celebration, and Harlan gave a speech that had half the guests in tears, talking about love and commitment and the importance of sitting with someone through their dark moments until they could smile again. Emma's parents, good people who ran a bakery in town, welcomed Henry into their family with open arms, and Henry in turn brought Emma fully into his. The young couple built a small house on the far end of the Emerson property, starting their own life while remaining close to family. Henry continued to work the ranch with his father, the two men developing an even deeper bond as they labored side by side. Emma proved to be a wonderful addition to the family, getting along famously with Olivia and treating her in-laws with affection and respect. In the fall of that same year, Rose left for San Francisco and her college education. It was a bittersweet departure, the whole family proud but sad to see her go. She promised to write often and come home for holidays. True to her word, letters arrived weekly, full of details about her classes, her new friends, the exciting ideas she was learning. Olivia treasured every letter, reading them aloud to the family at dinner. Thomas, now 17, had indeed started working seriously with horses. He had a gift for it, an almost uncanny ability to understand and communicate with the animals. Word spread, and people began bringing their difficult horses to him, paying good money for his training services. Harlan watched his youngest son with pride, seeing him find his path in the world. In 1904, Henry and Emma had their first child, a daughter they named Lily Rose. Harlan and Olivia became grandparents for the first time, and the experience was everything people had told them it would be and more. Holding that tiny baby girl, seeing his son become a father, Harlan felt the circle of life completing itself in the most beautiful way. Olivia was an adoring grandmother, constantly knitting little clothes and blankets, always ready to take the baby when Emma needed a break. "I forgot how wonderful babies are when you can give them back," Olivia joked one afternoon as she rocked Lily Rose to sleep. "I did not forget," Harlan said, "but I agree it is nice to get the best parts without quite so much of the sleepless nights." Rose came home for the summer of 1905, and she was transformed. She had always been intelligent and curious, but college had given her a confidence and worldliness that was new. She talked about women's suffrage and social reform, about mathematics and science, about dreams of maybe becoming a teacher or even a professor someday. She shocked the family by announcing that she had no intention of marrying, at least not anytime soon, because she had too many other things she wanted to accomplish first. "I want to make a difference in the world," she said passionately. "And I can do that better if I am not tied down by a husband and children right away. Maybe someday, but not now." Some families might have been scandalized, but Harlan and Olivia supported her completely. They had not raised their daughter to be conventional, and they were proud of her ambition and independence. "Just promise you will be happy," Olivia said. "That is all I have ever wanted for any of you." "I promise," Rose said, hugging her mother tightly. "I learned from the best. You showed me that a woman can be a businesswoman and a wife and a mother. That she does not have to choose just one thing. I am just rearranging the order a bit." By 1906, Thomas had officially started his own horse training business, using a portion of the ranch property his parents gave him for his 21st birthday. He built a round pen, some stables, and a small cabin for himself. Young men began coming from miles around to learn from him, and he took on a few apprentices. His reputation grew, and soon horses were being brought to him from as far away as Sacramento and even San Francisco. The ranch itself continued to prosper. Harlan was now 58 years old, his hair more silver than brown, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. But he was still strong and capable, still up before dawn to start the day's work. He had handed over many of the day-to-day operations to Henry, but he still loved being involved, still found satisfaction in the physical labor and the rhythm of ranch life. Olivia was 53, and if anything, she had grown more beautiful with age. Her auburn hair had silver threads running through it now, and she wore reading glasses for her bookwork, but her eyes still sparkled with intelligence and humor. She had turned the general store into such a success that she now owned 2 stores, one in Chico and a new one in nearby Durham. She had hired managers for both, allowing her to oversee the operations without being tied down to daily store hours. They had become respected elders in the community, people whose advice was sought and whose example was admired. They supported local charities, helped young couples get started, employed numerous people over the years, and contributed to the growth and betterment of Chico in countless ways. But they never forgot where they had started, never lost sight of the fact that they had built their life from nothing, with help from kind people who had given them chances. In the spring of 1908, 30 years after they had met by the river, Harlan planned a special surprise for Olivia. He spent weeks organizing it, enlisting the help of their children and friends, somehow managing to keep it secret despite Olivia's uncanny ability to figure out when he was up to something. On a beautiful afternoon in late June, Harlan told Olivia he wanted to take a ride with her, just the 2 of them. They had not done that in a while, and she agreed readily, happy to spend time alone with him. They rode out on the same trail they had taken that first time he taught her to ride, and Olivia reminisced about how terrified she had been. "I thought I was going to fall off and die," she said with a laugh. "You were so patient with me." "You were a natural," Harlan replied. "You just needed confidence." He led her to the riverbank, to the exact spot where they had met, and there, to Olivia's astonishment, was a beautiful scene. Blankets were laid out, a picnic basket waited, and flowers adorned the area. But more than that, gathered around were their children and grandchildren, Daniel and Margaret Hawthorne and their family, Sarah Freeman supported by her grandson, Mrs. Campbell in a wheelchair but still very much alive at 92, and dozens of other friends and neighbors. "What is all this?" Olivia asked, tears already streaming down her face. "This is a celebration," Harlan said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. 30 years ago today, I found you sitting right here by this river, crying like your heart was broken. I sat down beside you and stayed until you smiled. It was the best decision I ever made, and I wanted to celebrate that day and everything it led to." He took her hand and led her to the center of the gathering. Their children came forward first. Henry, now 28 and a father himself, hugged his mother tightly. "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like," he said. "You and Papa taught me how to be a husband and a father." Rose, home from San Francisco, where she was now teaching mathematics at a women's college, kissed her mother's cheek. "Thank you for teaching me that I could be anything I wanted to be. You proved it by example." Thomas, 23 and already considered one of the best horsemen in the region, gave her his characteristic crooked smile. "Thank you for being the best mama a son could ask for. For loving us and supporting us no matter what." Then came the grandchildren, all three of them now. Lily Rose was 4, and Henry and Emma's twin boys, Michael and Matthew, were 2. They presented Olivia with drawings they had made, childish but heartfelt expressions of love. One by one, friends came forward to share what Harlan and Olivia's example had meant to them, how they had been helped or inspired or encouraged over the years. There were stories of loans given when someone was struggling, of advice that had saved a business, of comfort offered during hard times, of countless small kindnesses that had added up to something significant. Mrs. Campbell, her voice quavering with age but still strong with emotion, spoke for many when she said, "You two showed us what it means to build a life on love and kindness. You never forgot where you came from, and you never stopped helping others along the way. This town is better because you are in it." Finally, when everyone had spoken, Harlan turned to Olivia and took both her hands in his. 30 years ago, I was a lonely man who had convinced himself that being alone was enough. Then I met you, and everything changed. You taught me that love is worth the risk, that opening your heart is the bravest thing you can do, that life is meant to be shared. You have been my partner, my best friend, my lover, the mother of my children, and the keeper of my heart. I fall in love with you more deeply every single day, and if I had to do it all over again, I would not change a single thing. I love you, Olivia Emerson. I always have and I always will. Olivia was crying openly now, but her face was radiant with joy. I love you too, Harlan. You saved me that day by the river, but you have continued to save me every day since. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real man is. You have been my rock, my joy, my everything. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for loving me. They kissed there by the river, surrounded by the community they had built and the family they had created. And it was every bit as magical as their first kiss had been all those years ago in Mrs. Campbell's garden. The picnic that followed was a joyous affair. There was food and music and laughter, children running and playing, friends sharing stories, the warmth of a community celebrating two people who had contributed so much to it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, people began to drift away, heading home with full hearts and good memories. Finally, only Harlan and Olivia remained by the river, sitting on the same rocks where they had sat 30 years before. The water flowed over the smooth stones, eternal and unchanging. Birds called from the trees. The air smelled of summer and possibility. "This was the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me," Olivia said softly. "Thank you." "I wanted you to know how much that day meant," Harlan replied. "Not just to me, but to everyone whose lives we have touched because we met. All of this, all the good things we have done and the family we have built, it all started right here. I wanted to honor that." "Sometimes I think about that day," Olivia said. "How close I came to just giving up completely. If you had not stopped, if you had not sat with me and made me feel less alone, I do not know what I would have done. You saved my life, Harlan, literally saved it." "And you saved mine," Harlan said, "maybe not as literally, but just as truly. You gave me a reason to live, not just exist. You gave me love and family and purpose. We saved each other." They sat together until the stars came out, talking and remembering and dreaming about the years still to come. They were in the sunset of their lives now, but it was a beautiful sunset, full of color and warmth. They had grandchildren to watch grow up, maybe even great-grandchildren someday. They had the ranch to continue building, businesses to oversee, a community to contribute to. They had each other, and that had always been enough. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the house was glowing with lamplight, windows bright with welcome. Inside waited their son and his family, staying the night as they often did. Inside was home, that precious thing they had built together through love and hard work, and an absolute refusal to give up on each other. Harlan helped Olivia dismount, and they stood for a moment in the yard, holding hands and looking at their home. Not bad for a stranded woman and a cowboy who stopped to help her, Olivia observed. Not bad at all, Harlan agreed. They walked to the house together, as they had walked through life together, side by side and hand in hand. Behind them lay 3 decades of love and partnership. Ahead lay whatever time remained, and they would face it the same way they had faced everything else, together, always together. And if you had asked either of them what the secret to their success was, what had made their marriage work and their family thrive and their life together so rich, they would have given the same answer. They had chosen each other, every single day. In the big moments and the small ones, in the easy times and the hard ones, they had chosen love. They had chosen to sit with each other through the tears until the smiles came. They had chosen to be partners in the fullest sense, supporting each other's dreams and shouldering each other's burdens. They had chosen kindness and patience and forgiveness and laughter, and that had made all the difference. Years continued to unfold in their gentle pattern. By 1912, Harlan was in his mid-60s and had officially retired from the heavy ranch work, though he still loved to be outside and involved. Henry ran the ranch now with capability and wisdom, having added his own innovations while respecting the foundation his parents had built. Rose had become a professor at her college in San Francisco and had written a mathematics textbook that was being used across the state. Thomas's horse training operation had expanded to include 3 full-time assistants and more business than he could handle. More grandchildren had joined the family. Henry and Emma had 5 children now, and Thomas had finally married a lovely young woman named Clara who shared his passion for horses. They had 1 child so far, with another on the way. The Emerson ranch was alive with the laughter of children, 3 generations living and working together in harmony. Harlan and Olivia had built a smaller house for themselves on the property, leaving the big house to Henry and his growing family. Their new home was cozy and comfortable, with a large front porch where they spent most evenings. They had slowed down, as people do with age, but they were still active and engaged with life. Olivia still oversaw her stores, though more as an advisor than a manager. Harlan still consulted on ranch decisions, though the final calls were Henry's to make. They had become the family's historians and storytellers, the keepers of memories and traditions. Grandchildren would climb into their laps and beg for stories, and Harlan and Olivia would oblige, telling tales of the old days, of how Chico used to be, of family adventures and misadventures. Their favorite story to tell, requested over and over, was about how they met. They would take turns narrating, each adding details the other forgot, painting a picture of that fateful day by the river. The children never tired of hearing about how Grandma had been so sad and how Grandpa had sat with her and taught her to skip stones until she smiled. It was a story about kindness and love, about how small actions could change lives, about how broken things could be made whole. In the fall of 1915, Mrs. Campbell passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 99. It seemed like the whole town turned out for her funeral. All the lives she had touched over her long life coming together to celebrate her. Harlan and Olivia spoke at the service, talking about how she had given Olivia a place to stay when she had nowhere to go, how her kindness had been a crucial part of their beginning. The losses would continue, as they inevitably do. Sarah Freeman died the following spring, and Daniel Hawthorne 2 years after that. Each loss was painful, a reminder that life was finite and precious. But each loss also reminded Harlan and Olivia how lucky they were to still have each other, to still have their health and their family and their life together. In 1920, 42 years after they had met, Harlan and Olivia celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary. They were both in their 70s now, Harlan 72 and Olivia 67. They moved slower than they used to, had aches and pains that were constant companions, needed afternoon naps and regular visits from the doctor. But they were still themselves, still the people who had fallen in love by a river decades ago. The anniversary celebration was a family affair, their children and grandchildren gathering for a big dinner at the ranch. Rose had come home from San Francisco, where she was now the head of the mathematics department at her college. Henry and Emma's children ranged from 17 down to 8, a house full of energy and life. Thomas and Clara had 3 children now, and Thomas Jr. at 10 was already showing his father's gift with horses. After dinner, when the children had been sent off to play and the adults were lingering over coffee, Henry raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast," he said, "to Mama and Papa, who have shown us all what love really looks like. You have built something extraordinary, not just this ranch or the businesses, but a family founded on love and respect. You have shown us how to treat each other, how to face challenges, how to build a life that matters. Thank you for your example, and for the love you have always shown us. Happy anniversary." "Happy anniversary," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. Harlan looked around the table at his family, at the legacy he and Olivia had created. 3 children who had become good, successful, happy adults. 8 grandchildren so far, with more likely to come. A ranch that would continue for generations. Businesses that employed people and contributed to the community. A life built on love that had rippled outward in ways he could never have imagined that day by the river. "I want to say something too," Olivia said, standing up with some difficulty, her hand resting on Harlan's shoulder for support. "Your father and I have been blessed beyond measure. We started with nothing except love for each other and a willingness to work hard. Everything we have, everything we have built, it all comes from that. And I want you all to know that the secret to a happy life is not money or success, or even perfect circumstances. It is choosing to love each other through the hard times and the good times. It is sitting with each other until the smiles come. It is being partners in the truest sense." She looked down at Harlan with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, my love, for sitting with me by that river 42 years ago. Everything good in my life started that day." That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Harlan and Olivia sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The night was clear and cool, perfect for sitting outside. They held hands and rocked slowly in their chairs, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of knowing each other. "You think we did it right?" Harlan asked, a question he had asked before and would probably ask again. "I think we did the best we could," Olivia replied, her standard answer. "And I think our best was pretty good. Look at our children, Harlan. Look at our grandchildren. They are good people, all of them. They love each other. They work hard. They treat people right. What more could we ask for?" "Nothing," Harlan agreed. "You are right. We have been blessed." They sat together until Olivia started to nod off, and then Harlan gently helped her inside and to bed. As he settled beside her, pulling the quilts up around them both, he thought about the passage of time and the inevitable end that awaited them all. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid of leaving Olivia, or worse, of her leaving him. He could not imagine his life without her in it. "I love you," he whispered as he did every night. "I love you too," she murmured, already half asleep. "Always have, always will." Those words carried them through the remaining years. By 1925, they were both slowing down significantly. Harlan was 77, and his body bore the evidence of a life of hard physical labor. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, his back bothered him, and he tired easily. Olivia was 72, and her health was generally good, though her eyesight was failing and she could no longer read without very strong glasses. But their minds were still sharp, their love still strong, and their days were full of family. Henry now had grandchildren of his own, making Harlan and Olivia great-grandparents 3 times over. The family tree they had started had branched out in wonderful ways, full of good people carrying on their legacy. In the summer of 1928, exactly 50 years after they had met, Harlan insisted on taking Olivia back to the river one more time. Their children protested, worried about the exertion, but Harlan was stubborn. "I found her there 50 years ago today," he said firmly. "And I want to go back there with her now. You can all come along if you want, but we are going." In the end, it became a family expedition. Henry drove Harlan and Olivia in his automobile, one of the modern conveniences that had changed their world. The rest of the family followed in other cars and on horseback. When they reached the river, Harlan insisted on walking Olivia down to the exact spot, though it took them a long time and they had to stop several times to rest. Finally, they reached the smooth rocks where it had all begun. The river still flowed, eternal and unchanging. The cottonwood trees still provided shade. Everything and nothing had changed. "This is where I first saw you," Harlan said, his voice quavering with age but strong with emotion. "Right here. You were crying and you looked so lost. I knew I had to help you." "And you did," Olivia said, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "You saved me, Harlan, and then you loved me. For 50 beautiful years you have loved me." "50 years is not enough," Harlan said. "I would take 100 more if I could." "So would I," Olivia whispered. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren surrounded them, 3 generations witnessing this moment. Harlan carefully helped Olivia sit on the same rock where she had sat 50 years before, and he sat beside her just as he had then. And there, by that river, they renewed the love that had sustained them through 5 decades, through all the joys and sorrows, challenges and triumphs, ordinary days and extraordinary moments. That night was one of the last truly good ones. 2 months later, Harlan suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. He lingered for several weeks, surrounded by family, his mind mostly clear but his body failing. Olivia never left his side, holding his hand and talking to him, reminiscing about their life together, telling him over and over how much she loved him. On a quiet afternoon in October 1928, with Olivia holding his hand and all 3 of their children present, Harlan Emerson took his last breath. He was 80 years old and had lived a full, rich life. His last word was Olivia, a benediction and a declaration of love that lasted beyond life itself. The funeral was enormous, the largest Chico had ever seen. Harlan had touched countless lives over his 80 years, and people came from across the state to pay their respects. But for Olivia, it was all a blur. The love of her life, her partner for 50 years, was gone, and she felt as lost as she had that day by the river when she was 22. Her children worried about her in the weeks that followed. She seemed to shrink into herself, the spark that had always animated her dimming. She went through the motions of living but without joy, and they could see her fading. 3 months after Harlan's death, on a cold January morning, Olivia announced that she wanted to go to the river. Her children exchanged worried looks but agreed, thinking the outing might do her good. Henry drove her there, and Rose walked with her down to the spot where she had first met their father. "Would you like me to stay with you, Mama?" Rose asked gently. "No, dear," Olivia said. "I would like to be alone here for a little while if you do not mind. I promise I will not do anything foolish. I just want to sit with my memories." Rose reluctantly agreed, stationing herself close enough to help if needed but far enough to give her mother privacy. She watched as Olivia carefully lowered herself onto the same rock where she had sat with Harlan 50 years before, where they had sat together for the last time just months ago. Olivia closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her. She could almost feel Harlan sitting beside her, his solid presence, his gentle voice. She remembered that first day, how devastated she had been, how convinced she was that her life was over. She remembered how he had just sat with her, not trying to fix everything or offering empty platitudes, just being present until she could smile again. She remembered their first kiss in Mrs. Campbell's garden, the wonder of discovering that he loved her too. She remembered their wedding day, standing beside him and promising forever, and actually getting to keep that promise for 50 years. She remembered the births of their children, each one a miracle. She remembered building the ranch together, the hard work and the satisfaction of creating something lasting. She remembered thousands of ordinary moments, breakfasts and conversations and quiet evenings on the porch, the fabric of a life woven together one day at a time. She remembered his last breath, the way his hand had squeezed hers one final time, the love in his eyes even as they closed for the last time. And she felt gratitude, overwhelming gratitude, that she had been given 50 years with him, that she had known what real love felt like, that she had built a life that mattered. As she sat there by the river, Olivia felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. She was 75 years old, and she was tired. She missed Harlan with an ache that went bone deep, but she could also feel proud of everything they had built together, the family and the legacy that would continue long after she was gone. She picked up a smooth stone from the riverbank, just as she had 50 years ago when Harlan had taught her to skip stones. She held it in her hand, feeling its weight and smoothness, remembering that day. Then, with effort, she stood up and threw it toward the water. Her aim was poor and her strength limited, but the stone managed one skip before sinking beneath the surface. And Olivia smiled. Not the huge, joyous smile of youth, but a quiet smile of peace and completion. She had been sad when she first came to this river, and someone had sat with her until she smiled. She was sad again now, but she could still find reasons to smile, still appreciate the beauty of a life well lived and a love that transcended even death. "Thank you, Harlan," she whispered to the wind. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for everything." Olivia lived for 3 more years, long enough to see more great-grandchildren born, to celebrate Henry's 50th birthday, to see Rose publish another book, to watch Thomas's horse training operation expand even further. She lived long enough to know that the family she and Harlan had built was strong and would continue, that the love they had shared had created ripples that would extend through generations. She died peacefully in her sleep in March of 1932, at the age of 78. Her children found her the next morning in her bed, a serene expression on her face, as if she had found something wonderful in her dreams. They liked to think that she had been reunited with Harlan, that they were together again, and that thought brought them comfort. Olivia was buried beside Harlan in the Chico cemetery, under a large oak tree with a view of the mountains. Their shared headstone was simple: Harlan and Olivia Emerson, partners in life and love, forever together. The ranch continued under Henry's ownership, and then his sons, and then his grandsons. The general stores remained in the family for 2 more generations before finally being sold. Thomas's horse training operation became legendary, and his descendants continued it for decades. Rose never married but had a distinguished academic career, and she established a scholarship fund for young women seeking higher education, funded by her own earnings and the inheritance from her parents. The family grew and branched, spreading across California and beyond. But every generation was told the story of Harlan and Olivia, of how they met by a river when she was crying and he sat with her until she smiled. The story became family legend, a reminder of the power of kindness, the importance of love, and the truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. And on certain quiet evenings, when the light hits just right, people say you can still see 2 figures sitting by that river, an old cowboy and the woman he loved, together forever in the place where their story began. The story of Harlan and Olivia Emerson became part of Chico's history, a tale told to illustrate the best of what the town represented. Their ranch, their businesses, their descendants, all continued to contribute to the community. But more than any material legacy, they left behind an example of how to love well, how to build a life that mattered, how to face challenges with grace and kindness. They had started with nothing except each other, 2 people whose paths crossed at exactly the right moment. A woman crying by a river, a man who chose to stop and help. From that single act of compassion grew a love story that spanned half a century and touched countless lives. It was a story that proved that kindness matters, that love endures, and that sometimes the simplest gesture, sitting with someone in their pain until they can smile again, can change the entire trajectory of a life. And that was the legacy of Harlan and Olivia Emerson, the cowboy and the woman by the river, whose love story began with tears and ended with smiles, encompassing everything in between that makes a life worth living.